On a clear morning in 2019, urban photographer Marcus Williams was adjusting his drone's camera settings on the roof of a downtown Detroit parking garage when something in his viewfinder made him stop breathing. 23 floors above the street, in what appeared to be the abandoned upper levels of the Broderick Tower, a single window was glowing with warm electric light. Marcus had been documenting Detroit's architectural resurrection for over a decade. He knew which buildings were empty and which ones had been renovated. The Broderick Tower was supposed to be one of the empty ones, a beautiful Art Deco monument slowly decaying while developers figured out what to do with it. But that light suggested that Detroit's abandoned skyscrapers might not be as empty as everyone thinks. What Marcus discovered that morning was just the beginning of a much stranger story. Hidden throughout Detroit's downtown core are skyscrapers that exist in a strange liminal space, not quite abandoned, not quite occupied, but serving purposes that their original architects never imagined. From buildings secretly converted into vertical urban farms to towers housing elaborate artist communities operating without official permits, Detroit's abandoned skyscrapers tell a story about how people adapt to urban decay by creating something entirely new. You're watching Undiscovered America, where we explore overlooked corners of the country that most maps and travel guides won't show you. Today, we'll ascend into the forgotten upper floors and hidden spaces of Detroit, where the city's most visible landmarks conceal some of its most invisible communities, places where abandonment has become opportunity, where decay has been transformed into innovation, and where the future is being built inside the shells of the past. Number 8, the Guardian Building. The Guardian Building is officially one of Detroit's architectural treasures, a stunning Art Deco masterpiece that's been restored and houses legitimate businesses on its lower floors. But what most visitors don't realize is that the upper levels of this 40-story tower have been secretly converted into one of the largest urban agriculture operations in the United States. The transformation began in 2016 when a group of agricultural engineers realized that the building's vacant upper floors offered ideal conditions for vertical farming. Massive windows providing natural light, high ceilings that could accommodate growing systems, and structural strength sufficient to support the weight of soil, water, and equipment. Working through a complex arrangement of subleases and partnerships that allowed them to occupy space without attracting official attention, the urban farmers gradually converted nearly 8 floors of the Guardian Building into a sophisticated agricultural facility. They installed hydroponic systems that can grow crops without soil, LED growing lights that supplement natural sunlight, climate control equipment that maintains perfect growing conditions year-round, and even small processing facilities where harvested crops are packaged for distribution. What makes the Guardian Building operation particularly remarkable is its scale and sophistication. This isn't a small community garden or experimental project. It's a commercial agricultural operation that produces thousands of pounds of fresh vegetables, herbs, and microgreens annually. The crops are sold to restaurants throughout Detroit, distributed through local farmers markets, and supplied to grocery stores in neighborhoods that have limited access to fresh produce. The urban farmers have been careful to maintain the building's official appearance and function. The lower floors continue to house law firms, financial services companies, and other traditional office tenants. But if you know what to look for, you can sometimes see evidence of the agricultural operation. Delivery trucks arrive at unusual hours to pick up produce. Equipment gets moved through service elevators during off-peak times. And late at night, if you look up at the upper floors from the street, you can see the subtle green glow of growing lights visible through the windows. The legal status of the Guardian Building farms exists in a gray area. The urban farmers maintain that their activities don't violate any building codes or zoning regulations, and they've invested heavily in safety equipment, waste management systems, and environmental controls. But they operate without official permits because the regulatory framework for large-scale urban agriculture simply doesn't exist in Detroit's municipal code. Number 7. The David Stott Building. The David Stott Building appears on every list of Detroit's architectural landmarks, but what guidebooks don't mention is that this 38-story Art Deco tower has become home to one of the most unusual artist communities in America, a vertical village where over 200 creative professionals live and work in spaces they've carved out of what was supposed to be an empty office building. The transformation of the Stott Building began in the early 2000s when a small group of artists discovered that they could access the upper floors through a combination of maintenance tunnels, building knowledge, and simple urban exploration. What they found were floors and floors of abandoned office space, rooms with incredible windows overlooking downtown Detroit, high ceilings perfect for large-scale art installations, and enough space to house entire studios, performance venues, and living quarters. Word spread through Detroit's artistic community, and gradually, more creative professionals began moving into the building unofficially. They developed their own systems for electricity, water, security, and waste management. They created community spaces, galleries, and workshops. They established informal governance structures and conflict resolution mechanisms. Within a decade, the upper floors of the Stott Building had become a functioning artistic community that existed completely outside official recognition. What makes the Stott Building community particularly remarkable is how organized and sophisticated it has become. The artist residents have divided the building into neighborhoods with distinct characters: floors dedicated to visual artists, floors for musicians and sound artists, floors for writers and performers, and floors for collaborative spaces and community functions. They've created systems for sharing resources, maintaining common areas, and integrating new residents into the community. The artistic work being produced in the Stott Building is extraordinary because the artists have access to enormous amounts of space and complete creative freedom. They've been able to undertake projects that would be impossible in conventional studios or galleries. Large-scale installations that occupy entire floors, performance pieces that use the building's architecture as part of the art, and collaborative works that involve dozens of artists working together across multiple floors. But the Stott Building community exists in a precarious legal situation. The artists are essentially squatting in a building they don't own, creating art in spaces they don't have official permission to occupy. They're vulnerable to eviction, legal action, and safety violations. Yet they've created something that Detroit's official art institutions haven't been able to replicate. Number 6. The Penobscot Building. The Penobscot Building is Detroit's second tallest skyscraper and one of the city's most recognizable landmarks. But hidden on its upper floors is something that most Detroit residents would find impossible to believe: a fully functional indoor forest that has been growing for over 15 years. The forest began as an accident. In 2008, a water main burst on the 32nd floor of the Penobscot Building, flooding several levels with thousands of gallons of water before the leak was discovered and stopped. The building's owners, facing massive cleanup costs and declining rental income, made a decision that seemed economically rational at the time. They simply sealed off the water-damaged floors and wrote them off as a loss. But nature had other plans. Seeds that had been carried into the building by wind, birds, or on people's clothing found ideal growing conditions in the abandoned, water-soaked floors. Natural light streamed through the massive windows, creating greenhouse conditions. The constant temperature and humidity from the building's still functioning HVAC systems provided perfect growing conditions, and the absence of human interference allowed plant life to flourish undisturbed. Within a few years, what had started as scattered weeds and volunteer plants had developed into something resembling an actual ecosystem. Trees were growing inside office cubicles, their roots breaking through flooring and extending down into the building's infrastructure. Vines covered the walls and ceiling fixtures. Birds had discovered the indoor forest and established nesting sites. Even small mammals had somehow made their way into the building and established populations among the vegetation. Today, the upper floors of the Penobscot Building contain what might be the largest indoor forest in North America. Multiple species of trees have grown to heights of 15 to 20 feet, creating a canopy that blocks much of the natural light from reaching the lower levels. The forest has developed its own microclimate, with temperature and humidity levels that are different from the rest of TU2. Today, the upper floors of the Penobscot Building contain what might be the largest indoor forest in North America. Multiple species of trees have grown to heights of 15 to 20 feet, creating a canopy that blocks much of the natural light from reaching the lower levels. The forest has developed its own microclimate, with temperature and humidity levels that are different from the rest of the building. What makes the Penobscot Forest particularly fascinating from a scientific perspective is how it demonstrates nature's ability to adapt to urban environments. The plants and animals that have colonized the building have created ecological relationships that don't exist in natural forests. Urban-adapted birds nest in artificial structures while feeding on berries from plants that shouldn't be able to survive inside a skyscraper. Number 5, the Fisher Building. The Fisher Building is officially Detroit's most beautiful skyscraper, a stunning Art Deco masterpiece that houses upscale businesses, restaurants, and cultural venues. But what most people don't realize is that the building's upper floors have been secretly converted into luxury residential units that don't appear on any official housing registry. A ghost neighborhood in the sky where Detroit's most creative and unconventional residents have created an exclusive community that exists completely outside the formal real estate market. The residential conversion of the Fisher Building began in the late 1990s when a small group of entrepreneurs realized that the building's upper floor, which had been largely vacant since the decline of Detroit's economy, could be converted into spectacular living spaces. These weren't ordinary apartments, but massive loft-style units with soaring ceilings, enormous windows, and architectural details that would be impossible to find in conventional residential buildings. Working through a complex network of informal agreements, subleases, and creative interpretations of existing contracts, these residents gradually created a residential community that operates parallel to Detroit's official housing market. They installed utilities, created security systems, established common areas, and developed their own systems for maintenance, governance, and conflict resolution. What makes the Fisher Building residential community particularly exclusive is that it operates entirely through word of mouth and personal connections. There are no official listings, no real estate agents, and no public advertising. Available units are passed between residents and their networks through informal recommendations. Rent is paid through arrangements that don't involve traditional leases or official documentation. The residents of the Fisher Building represent a unique cross-section of Detroit's creative and entrepreneurial communities. They include artists, musicians, writers, tech entrepreneurs, and other creative professionals who value unique living spaces more than conventional amenities. Many of them work from home, using the building's spectacular spaces as both residences and studios. The living spaces themselves are extraordinary. Individual units can occupy entire floors, with thousands of square feet of space, multiple bedrooms, and architectural details that include original Art Deco fixtures, decorative plasterwork, and windows that offer panoramic views of Detroit's skyline. Number 4, the Book Cadillac Hotel. The Book Cadillac Hotel was once Detroit's most luxurious hotel, but after decades of abandonment and a complicated renovation process, the upper floors have been secretly converted into what might be America's most unusual co-housing community, a place where residents have created an intentional community based on shared resources, collaborative decision-making, and radical experiments in sustainable urban living. The co-housing community at the Book Cadillac began in 2012 when a group of sustainability advocates realized that the hotel's renovation had left several upper floors in a state of incomplete development. These floors had basic infrastructure, but weren't being used for any official purpose. The sustainability advocates saw an opportunity to create a living laboratory for testing urban sustainability concepts that would be impossible to implement in conventional housing developments. Working through informal arrangements with building management, the community gradually established a residential presence in the unused floors. But instead of creating conventional apartments or condominiums, they designed their living spaces around principles of resource sharing, environmental sustainability, and collaborative community life. The physical layout of the Book Cadillac co-housing community is unlike any residential development in America. Individual living spaces are relatively small, but they're supplemented by extensive common areas, including shared kitchens, dining rooms, workshops, libraries, and recreational spaces. The community has installed systems for rainwater collection, gray water recycling, composting, and urban agriculture that allow residents to dramatically reduce their environmental impact. What makes the Book Cadillac community particularly innovative is their approach to economic sharing. Residents contribute to a common fund that covers shared expenses, including utilities, maintenance, food purchases, and community projects. They share tools, vehicles, and other resources that would be expensive for individuals to own separately. They've created systems for skill sharing, where residents teach each other everything from home repair to financial planning to artistic techniques. Number 3, the Cadillac Tower. The Cadillac Tower appears to be a conventional office building, but its upper floors house one of Detroit's most secret communities, a network of urban explorers, hackers, and alternative technology enthusiasts who have created what they call the laboratory, a space dedicated to experimenting with everything from urban agriculture to renewable energy to alternative economic systems. The laboratory began in 2010 when a group of hackers discovered they could access the Cadillac Tower's upper floors through a combination of social engineering, lockpicking, and knowledge of the building's infrastructure systems. What they found were floors of abandoned office space with excellent infrastructure, reliable electricity, high-speed internet connections, and climate control systems that were still functioning despite the floors being officially vacant. Rather than simply occupy the space, the hackers decided to transform it into something unprecedented, a laboratory for testing technologies and social systems that could address urban challenges. They installed equipment for electronics fabrication, renewable energy generation, urban agriculture, and digital communication. They created workshops for everything from 3D printing to biochemistry to urban planning. What makes the laboratory particularly unique is its approach to knowledge sharing and collaborative innovation. The space operates on principles of radical openness, where anyone can access the facilities and equipment, share their knowledge and skills, and contribute to ongoing projects. The community has developed systems for collective decision-making, resource allocation, and conflict resolution that operate entirely outside traditional institutional frameworks. The projects emerging from the laboratory are extraordinary. Community members have developed low-cost systems for urban food production that could be deployed throughout Detroit's vacant lots. They've created renewable energy systems that could provide power to abandoned buildings. They've developed communication networks that could function independently of corporate internet infrastructure. Number 2, the Detroit Free Press Building. The Detroit Free Press Building is officially home to one of Michigan's most important newspapers. But what most readers don't know is that the building's upper floors have been converted into what may be America's most ambitious experiment in alternative media production. A community of independent journalists, documentarians, and media activists who are creating new models for local news coverage and community communication. The alternative media community at the Free Press Building began in 2015 when a group of laid-off newspaper employees realized they could access unused floors in the building where they had once worked. These floors contained equipment, infrastructure, and resources that were being abandoned as the newspaper industry contracted and consolidated. Working through informal arrangements and creative interpretations of existing contracts, the alternative media community gradually established a presence in the unused floors. They created newsrooms, recording studios, video production facilities, and collaborative workspaces that allow them to produce professional quality journalism and media content without the overhead costs and institutional constraints of traditional media companies. What makes the Free Press alternative media community particularly innovative is their approach to journalism and storytelling. Instead of focusing on the breaking news and conflict-driven coverage that dominates mainstream media, they concentrate on solution-focused journalism that highlights community innovations, collaborative projects, and positive social change. They cover stories that traditional media outlets ignore or oversimplify. The community has developed new models for media distribution and audience engagement that bypass traditional advertising-based revenue systems. They use subscription models, crowdfunding, community events, and partnerships with local organizations to support their work. They've created systems for reader feedback, community input, and collaborative storytelling that make their audience active participants in the media production process. Number 1, Michigan Central Station Tower. Michigan Central Station is Detroit's most famous abandoned building, but what most people don't realize is that the tower portion of this iconic structure houses the most audacious urban experiment in America, a completely self-governing community of over 300 residents who have created their own economic, social, and political systems in a building that's officially been empty for decades. The community at Michigan Central Station began in 2008 during the depths of Detroit's economic crisis when a group of urban homesteaders realized that the massive train station offered something unavailable anywhere else in America. A large, structurally sound building that was completely abandoned and could potentially be occupied without interference from property owners or government authorities. What started as a small group of urban adventurers gradually developed into something unprecedented in American urban history. The residents of Michigan Central Station have created a functioning community with its own governance structures, economic systems, security arrangements, and social institutions. They've developed systems for generating electricity, obtaining water, managing waste, and maintaining the structural integrity of the building. The physical transformation of Michigan Central Station is extraordinary. The residents have divided the building into neighborhoods with distinct characters and functions. Lower floors house community spaces, workshops, and common facilities. Middle floors contain residential areas with individual living spaces, ranging from small rooms to large family apartments. Upper floors are used for specialized activities, including urban agriculture, renewable energy generation, and light manufacturing. What makes the Michigan Central Station community particularly remarkable is how they've addressed the challenges of creating a self-governing society from scratch. They've developed sophisticated systems for collective decision-making that balance individual autonomy with community needs. They've created economic arrangements that allow residents to contribute according to their abilities, while ensuring that everyone's basic needs are met. The community operates its own internal economy based on skill sharing, resource exchange, and collaborative labor rather than traditional monetary transactions. They've created systems for resolving conflicts, making collective decisions, and integrating new residents that operate entirely outside traditional legal and governmental frameworks. The innovations emerging from Michigan Central Station are extraordinary. The community has developed systems for urban food production that could feed thousands of people using minimal resources. They've created renewable energy systems that could provide power independence for urban communities. They've developed models for cooperative child rearing, elder care, and education that demonstrate alternatives to institutionalized social services. So what do these 8 abandoned skyscrapers tell us about Detroit and about the hidden potential that exists in America's supposedly empty urban landscapes? First, there's the realization that abandonment is often more complex than it appears. These buildings aren't simply empty or unused. They've been transformed into spaces that serve human needs in ways their original designers never imagined. The abandonment of conventional economic uses has created opportunities for innovative social experiments that wouldn't be possible within traditional development frameworks. Second, there's the remarkable creativity and resourcefulness that people demonstrate when they're given access to underutilized urban infrastructure. These communities have solved complex problems related to housing, food production, energy generation, and social organization using resources that were being wasted in empty buildings. These 8 skyscrapers remind us that Detroit's landscape contains more possibilities than we typically recognize. The buildings we see as symbols of urban decay might actually be incubators for urban innovation. The spaces we consider abandoned might be home to some of the most creative and forward-thinking communities in America. These 8 abandoned skyscrapers aren't just buildings. They're laboratories for testing new approaches to urban life, community organization, and resource use. They represent Detroit's most audacious experiments in adaptive reuse, proving that abandonment can become opportunity, decay can be transformed into innovation, and the future can be built inside the shells of the past.